Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. James is going to follow on, and we've worked pretty closely together on this subsoiling exercise. Yes, I will share a little bit of information. I really want to just debunk some of the issues that have been faced with subsoiling, and they're mainly to do with the logistics of it. How can we actually do the job? We've talked about it for a number of years now, and we haven't got a lot of traction commercially. So I'm going to quickly talk only for about 5 minutes about what advances we've made in the last 18 months, which are pretty considerable. The problem we've got is these hostile subsoils. You can see this is a pretty typical Western Victoria paddock. We've got some topsoil, then we've got this massive clay, really hostile, lacks oxygen, massive in description, and not an ideal spot for roots. Also here we have a bleached layer, and that is another constraint that we have to put our mind towards. You can see on the slide on the right-hand side, the perched water table. The little brown area there is actually some compost that was put in. That's about 400 mils down. You can see it was actually working as a mold drain. The water was just running straight through that compost. But that perched water table is responsible for the buckshot layer or the bleached layer. So we're really challenged with our soils. We've done an amazing job with the topsoil. We've identified the constraints and made great progress in ameliorating them, but there's more to do. Why is this important? These soils make up 30 to 50% of the state. If we unlock the solution, there's huge potential for productivity gains, and I think most farmers would sign up to that if they knew they were going to get productivity gains, especially with the increase in land values through Western Victoria. We've seen through the rest of the country drought for the last 4 or 5 years. We've been blessed and it's rained down here, so we've hardly missed a beat. So if we can increase that, even 30% increase in productivity, it's a bit of a no-brainer, I think. The constraints, they constrain root development and the bucket size. And as Cam said, maybe the bucket size is not as important when we talk about moisture, but bucket size to access nutrient is really important. And I think that's one of the important things about subsoil amelioration is unlocking some of the nutrient in the bucket, not only the moisture. The other issue with the bucket size is we might have a bucket that holds 10 litres, but if we've got a bleached layer that restricts the usable moisture to 3 litres, there's an issue there. So one of the findings we've seen in the last few years is we need to know more about the constraints in our soils and identify them and find a way of ameliorating those problems. Blended ameliorants might be needed to target those hostilities. It's not good enough. And when we started on this subsoil amelioration, we just looked at putting, excuse the coarseness, the shit underground. It's not good enough to do that. And a lot of the research that's been done over the last few years is showing that we need to address sodicity at depth, and gypsum is one of the ways we can do that. And there are a whole lot of other constraints that our soils, particularly our subsoils, are throwing back at us. And Roger will talk more about that later on. What evidence that we're making some progress in this? The guys out at Yallock Estate at Balan have been doing a lot of work both off their own bat, supported by the federal government, and working with the Waite Institute over in Adelaide. And they did some trials, tube trials, what they call tube trials, where they went and grabbed soil out of the paddock, put it into PVC PVC pipes, and then grew a crop, reconstituted it as it would be in the paddock, and then they've grown crops. Don't worry about too much about what's said on this graph, but if we look at the left-hand side, that's the control. The second column is just putting shit underground, chook manure, and then we add gypsum into the mix, and you can see it shoots up rapidly. And a number of these other treatments here all have another additive into the mix, not just organic matter. The exciting thing is all these different amendments and blends of amendments have had an improvement on the control. You can see in 2018 and then again in 2019, they've all had an increase in yield, and that's really exciting because a lot of the people that were wary about subsoil amelioration and said, oh, it's just a nutrient effect. Yes, in the initial years, there isn't a nutrient effect, but when we're seeing 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track, we're still getting a response. Something else is happening there. You tackle some of the other soil constraints, and that's a long-term beneficial activity. And that's my hypothesis about why we're seeing sustained responses. What are we seeing is, I guess I'm often asked, if we look at the left-hand picture, that's the amendment chamber where the mouse is running around. It's composted garden waste, organic garden waste, and you can just see the root development. At 45 degrees, this is a summer crop. It's a soybean crop, and you can see that massive root development seeking out the amendment chamber. You can see the extra roots growing towards the amendment chamber. To me, that's really exciting, and a part of the work I'm going to look at this coming summer is to see how much more root development we're gaining. If we look at the right-hand picture, the same thing, amendment chamber in here. This is winter wheat sown in spring and grown over summer. Look at the massive amount of root development here, and you tail off above the amendment chamber, and it tails off when you go away from the amendment chamber. This is also the bleached layer or the buckshot layer, and that's why I think it's important. Yes, we're showing some improvement here above the amendment chamber, but here above the bleached layer, look at how little root development there is. To me, that's pretty exciting. What does it all mean? That's what we need to look at. If we can address not only down here, it's a sodic subsoil, clay subsoil, get some gypsum in there, improve that, but we also have to tackle this bleached area. What ameliorants are available in southwest Victoria? There's a whole, we're lucky. We've got a lot of intensive piggeries, chook sheds, all those sorts of things in southwest Victoria. So we've got a ready-made source of ameliorant, but we need to, it can't be too far away because cost kills you. We have to have it close by because we're looking at between 10 and 20 tonnes of material when we look at subsoiling. So we can't be carting it across the countryside. Harvest residue, and I guess I'm meaning stubble. That would be the holy grail of subsoil manuring. If we could use stubbles, 6-7 tonnes of cereal stubble, add the appropriate additives, that would be a fantastic result. The other really exciting part of the story would be to use organic urban waste. We know our urban cousins of producing a lot of organic waste that goes into landfill. If we could capitalise on that, use it, take that away from them and put it underground and have a good result, that would be a really good win-win situation for both our urban communities and the farmers. One of the other things we've looked at is in situ crops, grow a crop with the right nitrogen, carbon balance and put that underground. And then we've got the chemical amendments, the gypsum, the limes to address sodicity, acidity at depth. That all needs to be considered. This is some of the early work we've done with growing in situ crop. Faba beans, absolutely fantastic to deal with and put underground, but didn't last very long. I had a big response in initial years, but as Cam said earlier on, what it provided, the nutrient and the carbon was utilised really quickly. It wasn't something that was going to stay there for a long time if we were looking at increasing carbon levels. How do we get the amendment underground? And this is one of the issues that's really plagued the subsoil manuring operation for a number of years. It's not something that's new. This photo came from the 1920s in America. They were from the Midwest. They were trying to deal with the hard pan that nearly sent the Midwest broke in those years with drought and poor practices, tillage practices. So after they harvested their corn, they put a chopper through and blew it underground just to try and keep open the hard pan. So this is not a new concept, not a new idea. We've gone through 2004. We had the Mandrake Perez Whiteman subsoiler, as you can see, trial machine, and many of you will recognise the faces there, the pioneers of subsoil manuring. They graduated to the Blue Machine, as it's known. Was a huge advance and has done a lot of work around the country. Yallock Estate got into the game and upped the ante a bit. As you can see, this is quite a beast of a machine, the White Machine. It nearly had to have its own tractor to drive all the fans and blow the material underground. Was it mentioned earlier, Scott mentioned earlier, that James Hawkins commissioned the machine in 2019, and this was in an attempt to fill the void. A machine that was cost effective, could be used by the average farmer in Western Victoria with a 200 horsepower tractor, 150 horsepower tractor, and do the job. So James commissioned this machine, and I'll just run the video if I can find it. So that's the Hawkins machine, as it's known. It's done a fantastic job. It has had some teething problems, and it's had to be modified. But as you can see, that's going down about 300 to 400 mils underground. And in that particular case, we were using composted eco shelter waste. Then we come to the orange machine, the state-of-the-art Rolls-Royce of machines. And this machine is out in the field. It did 500 hectares of subsoiling up at Swan Hill this year. It is the beast of all beasts, and I'll just pay you. So that's the biggest of the commercially available machines, and is doing a great job. This particular paddock's at Rowan Peels, and for Peel Ag at Winchelsea, and we've got quite a 30 hectare paddock which has been subsoiled, and we're going to do some monitoring of that paddock, so we can really get a handle on commercially is this a viable operation to undertake. A really quick one. This is the Insitu machine. We worked with with Melbourne Uni, and this is putting crop underground. Grow it in the paddock and then put it underground. So they're the machines that are available or out there at the moment in various forms, and it's great to see we've actually got the Orange Machine and the Hawkins Machine, which are out doing the work commercially, which is a huge step for this process. The costs are coming down. That's been one of the big bones of contention. How much is all this going to cost? A contracting rate of $500 a hectare plus the amendment cost. Many of our farmers in southwest Victoria are lucky that they have an intensive livestock operation on their properties, so they can make their own compost. If we're close to Ballarat, Geelong, the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to use urban organic waste is coming along really well, that concept. As I said, the first commercial projects have been undertaken, 500 hectares at Swan Hill. That's growing to another 1,000 hectares this summer, and that's trying to reclaim irrigation land, degraded irrigation land in the Murray-Darling Basin. If we can improve the productivity, improve the water use efficiency of that irrigation land in the Murray-Darling, that's going to have a huge benefit to the whole community. Probably the last take-home message that I'm going to talk about, and Roger and James will talk more about it, we need to think about blending amendments to target specific hostilities when we're looking at subsoil amelioration. That's one of the big changes in our thoughts over the last couple of years. As I said earlier, it used to be all about just putting shit underground. That will work in some cases, but not always, and that it has led to a number of disappointing and results over the years. Inconsistent results, I guess, is the best way to talk about it, because it didn't address some of the other soil hostilities. Anyway, that's enough from me. The other exciting bit is there's a chaser bin to go with the big Orange Machine to fill that beast of a machine on the run. So we've made huge progress in machinery. It carries 30 tonnes and can fill that machine. So thank you, and I'll pass on to James.